This lecture today will be about psychological infantilism and the road to the soul. So I think it is hard to seriously begin to sum up or state the condition of humanity as it stands today. Obviously in the year of the pseudo-Christian Roman calendar of 2023, or whatever you want to call it. This massive amount of information that has been put into the hands of a species which is still in the state of psychological early adolescence. Maybe the word is the pre-teens, so to speak. And this massive amount of information, of course, is being spread on social media platforms, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, as well as obviously, at a more macro scale, the creation of the World Wide Web, the internet, early 90s, right, where that becomes kind of publicly, personally accessible. And slowly but surely, we've ramped up to the point of which all 7-8 billion, very near that amount of the entirety of humanity, with obviously some exceptions, has access to this internet, which is a sort of world tree, so to speak, right, that branches and takes its roots all over and across the earth and has impacts on everything from supply, distribution, all the ways that goods and services and information move in a worldwide sense. And this inundation of information, this perpetual inundation, which will be exponentially accelerated by the incoming influx of AI information, artificial intelligence generated information, is going to further throw the world or the earth of these pre-adolescent human beings into a state of primordial chaos. And what do I mean by this? So if you want to refer to the basic Gnostic teachings, specifically the Valentinian sect of Gnosticism, as well as like creation myths from the Canaanites, from the Greeks, so on and so forth, there is always this return to the power and the strength, or the pneuma, or the noumena. You could even describe it as the sort of access to the pleroma, or the access to the infinite, or the access to the wholeness, which is in actuality the existence or the body or the being of Christ within the human being. This is the axis upon which the human being stands on the earth. The axis of the horizontal and the vertical, or the worldly, the earthly, the material, and the spirit and the soul. The earthly and the material being the horizontal, and the spirit and the soul being the vertical. So there is this question, of course, this diametrically or dialectically opposed sort of predicament that this pre-adolescent humanity now stands in, which is this influx of information, which is a sort of self-gratifying hammer to the dopamine receptors and the instincts to acquire security, stability, pleasure, so on and so forth, of this pre-adolescent human being, which wants to feel safe and nurtured in the whole of this sort of dark and encroaching cosmos, or this idea of being surrounded by death and surrounded by nothingness, and yet in this one moment I am assuaged by, let's say, this addiction to this material, or this substance, or this information, or this easily digestible aspect of culture. This again, to refer to the bread and circuses of Juvenal's Rome, we enter into this place where I think it's Plato's time is a picture of eternity, or time is a still moment or an image of eternity. We are faced with this, and this is of course the human condition, where at once we have this aspect of the pleroma, or the wholeness, or the divinity, the divine spark within humanity, as the Gnostics would call it, that is being sort of faced down by this onslaught or onrush or waterfall of germinating ideas, technologies, time spectrums, all of these different ways in which place and time intersect to form this axis of the the infinite and the present, or the eternal and the ephemeral. And this is precisely the moment of primordial chaos upon which the fish walks out of the water, or the ape acquires access to a higher level of intelligence, whether you want to argue that comes from some sort of psychedelic awakening or encounter with a plant, or some sort of experience akin to the extinction of the dinosaurs by an asteroid, or the encounter with a comet, or the encounter with a extraterrestrial deity like a planet, so to speak. All of these things that lie dormant within the cosmos lie dormant within nature, and this is, of course, the allusion to the divine spark, or the eternal aspect or element which the human being can become conscious of, and this is the road to the soul. And this is, of course, you could say, in the time of the human history where the pre-adolescent or the adolescent undergoes an initiation ritual to become a member of the tribe, so to speak. Throughout ancient human history, this would involve the medicine person, or the medicine man, or the medicine woman of the tribe, or the if you want to call it the shaman, if you were going to use a Eastern European or ancient Russian terminology, right? There's a lot of different ways that we could refer to this figure, but this figure of esteemed wisdom, which would be a figure that has passed through or traveled through the veil, or you could say the shroud or veil of Maya, these illusory, impermanent things, and gone through into the pleroma and gained access or insight into this fundamental cosmic reality, or had an encounter with the nothing or the abyss through which the face of God peers, would initiate this child into the tribe, or initiate this child into the cosmos of mankind by revealing that there is in fact a vertical axis, right? Again, we are not living purely on this horizontal plane of hyper-materialistic sciences that are able to pinpoint and create rationalities, which again are firm identities, firm spectrums of being, or firm definitions, where this there is this presence of the divine spark, which can be summed up very simply in being pure creation, pure imagination. And this is, of course, the thing that impels and propels the human being into existence, through which, of course, this existence, life force energy, or sexual energy can be harnessed for any sort of endeavor. And this is, of course, where we reach the dangerous territory of human civilization, wherein we venture, many may say, right, you venture away from the tribe and into the wilderness, and that's where you encounter danger. But I would say something akin to the opposite. It's actually when you venture away from the wilderness and into the tribe is where you encounter the danger. And this danger is culture. And to be initiated or indoctrinated into culture, which is again what occurs in modern human society, this is society of the pre-adolescence, is not in fact an initiation on the path of the road to the soul, but in fact an ingratiation to marketing, to consumption, to shameless consumption all the time, and consumption as a form of perennial entertainment. It's like a child staring up at the mobile. Again, and this could be said, just to put very bluntly, in some of the ways that science approaches the stars or the cosmos. It's this, we are not achieving a state of imaginative wonder through the encounter of our existence interfacing with the primordial or the nature, right? Again, this axis of the body and the spirit. We're not, the wonder that is necessary for true creativity and true imagination is not what's being experienced. Instead, what is being experienced is this sort of, what is it, the 69er mentality or the 76er mentality, which is the gold mine mentality or the gold rush. This, I'm not entirely sure what that precise year was, but of course you have, it's the 49er. Yeah, of course, convenient you have a sports team named after that in America. But this mentality that is based around the harvesting, right? Again, maybe some sort of Freudian slip in there in those terminologies and the occlusion of them. That there is this harvesting of the nature for at all costs, right? In order to manufacture profit or to continue the generator or the it's put very well in the movie Metropolis, where it's this sort of Moloch that's being fed humanity. It's this engine that runs the entire course of civilization, the factory that continues to churn out bodies. For what, right? Of course, there's this question where you could reach the pinnacle of civilization and become a sort of technocrat billionaire or one of these feudal lords of modern times, so to speak, and you have everything, and yet there is this absence, right? And this is the implication of traveling so far down the road of Maya, which of course would be the horizontal road. And this is of course where the spirit meets the body, and the soul emerges up to be expressed and presented through the body through a form of grounding, right? This is again the allusion to the tree of life, up through the roots of hell, reaches down up through the roots of heaven, reaches down up through the roots of hell. And it must be communicated, right, that there is this vertical axis, which has all but hitherto been a dearth, right, an absence or a death of the spirit. And I alluded to this in one of the past lectures, but it is important to have an accurate hearing, translation of what Nietzsche says in the late 1800s when he says God is dead. It is not that all of a sudden this pleroma or this divine spark has disappeared and has gone from the earth. Rather, no, it is but that our ability to access or be with or commune with God, or in this sort of God nature that, of course, we are all privy to as children of God, or this Christ aspect, this divine child within us, the imaginative capacity, which is, of course, the sort of heterodox genius, this genius that is our responsibility and duty to cultivate and be present with. And that's something that emerges naturally and intuitively and innovatively through the body in the communion of the body, spirit, and soul. The vertical points and poles, the spirit and soul being the highest, the spirit being the highest, or the one Father, or the allness, or the pleroma, the soul being the lowest, or the well through which the philosopher's stone is retrieved, or the magnum opus is retrieved through the divine marriage of the sun and the moon, which is again the highest and the lowest. This moment, and this is something that can be accessed quite easily through an understanding of the cosmos in a rhythmic sense, in a time sense, where you have the high and the low represented by the Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn, this sort of path that the sun travels, each equinox, the spring equinox or the Aries point, the fall equinox or the Libra point. There is this dance, this breath, this sine wave, as referred to in the ancient Vedic scriptures, this breathing that occurs, and this breathing is the life and breath of the cosmos. And so this is where you hear the Om. The Om is this resounding sound that does not actually resound off of anything, because it is all there is. And to return to this path of the soul is the vertical path that is traveled. It is traveled down into the body. It is not into the marketplace. And of course, this is where you get the moment with I'm forgetting the specific name of the series of paintings. It's when Christ encounters the people who are making a market out of the church, right? And he drives them out with I believe with a knotted rope, and he says, "You will not trade in the house of God, right? You will not engage in this conduct in the house of God." And what he's referring to here is not the Old Testament God, so to speak, this God of ambivalent benevolence, maybe you could say, but it is actually this one God, this one Father of the pleroma. And it would be a mistake to say that, and we know this very clearly from the Nag Hammadi manuscripts, as well as from Christ's association with I'm forgetting the specific name of the sect that he was associated with, but Christ's association with Gnostic and mystery school teachings, that he understands that there is this fundamental and primordial deception that occurs when there is the belief in this sort of God of the material, where it is the God of creation with a lowercase c, as opposed to the God of creation with an uppercase C, this pleroma aspect where all is at one and all is at wholeness, and there has not been this separation down in the material realm where God is dead or God is lost through this sort of despiritualization of material, or this emptiness or dearth or absence, that material has all of a sudden become this sort of opaque vision, that there is the tree that is, of course, has all of the elements and acuities and aspects and names that humanity has taken and known to be a tree, or a chair or a guitar or something along these lines. But that in fact all remains whole within this divine spirit or this divine spark, and that all that exists is rather this divine spark, and it is this divine spark that shines through. The poet Rilke, his poem Torso of Apollo, says, "You must change your life." And the entire poem is centered around this idea of there's this glow, right, or this power that emanates from the torso of Apollo, and he describes this sort of explosion of cosmic force that radiates from inside the chest of Apollo, and it still remains there even within this statue that has been taken with time or flowed down the river of time, and that the divine spark is that which humanity coming into adulthood is going to learn, right? And that will involve a sort of rapid retriangulation or reorientation away from culture into the imaginative, creative capacity of the individual and reaching down into the soul. So when it is said in the Gnostic and Mystery School teachings around the world, when the spirit descends into the body, what happens, it's the divine spark enters the body and breathes life into the human being, much in the way that Athena is said to breathe life or breathe power or breathe energy or breathe war into heroes in the early Homeric texts. This breath of life is that which into the human, or we could say, again, life on earth is these people, and all are fallen angels, but they fall to rise. And to come into the body is to step into the possibility of connecting with the deepest, the lowest, right? And again, the lowest is the highest, and this is the journey through which the descent of humanity, much like the descent of Dante, or the descent of Penelope, or the descent of Inanna, right? Again, there's plenty of mythocultural, historical examples of this occurrence, and again, you could say with the temptation of Christ and Buddha's encounters with not only his inner life, but the cultural, historical life around him. These are all examples of the path of the soul, right? And walking with the path of the soul is leaving the village. It's not only leaving the village, it's not just walking into the wilderness, right? And there's a great example of this. You could just even very simply take it from a modern cultural story. It's not in the third book of the Lord of the Rings series, those texts, and the movies, great movies. It's the three of the heroes. They're not even just going on the plane of the material, right? There's something that needs to happen in order for them to win this kind of penultimate battle, and kind of turn the forces of light over the dark. And they travel into this. It is this path in between the mountains and path down through the mountains into this sort of like graven cave, and it says the dead rule these lands, do not enter without the dead's permission, effectively. And they have to go in order to recruit these dead soldiers who made a promise to the previous king, which one of the heroes is now inheriting that role, becoming the new king, or being the king returned, the title of the book. And there is a sort of encounter that they have there down in the realm. Again, the symbolism cannot be any more explicit. Down through the cave, down through the mountains into the cave, which again is this retrenchment of this open air. There's these events that are occurring on the material soil out in the sun, and they have to again, this is part of the heroic cycle They go down into the cave to meet with the king of the dead and recruit the dead to fight with them against this power of evil, or this force of evil which is overtaking the land. And he proves to the king of the dead that he is the inheritor of the king of the living by bearing his sword against him, and his sword repels the king of the dead, who is an apparition. And this is an allusion to the sword here being the sword in the stone, or the spirit in the soul. And he bears this knowing that this is his inheritance. And this is something that is again present in the Arthurian myths and the Holy Grail cycle. These images, these forces, are only accessible by going within, and having an encounter with the psychical forces, these forces of the imagination, these forces of creativity, which, again, these are things that are not necessarily visible, right? And again, when they're expressed, they need to be expressed through these creatively mediated imaginative lenses, conventionally, again, through painting. Huge boom of the Arthurian romantic paintings with painters, I believe, like Burne-Jones. Romantic poetry in the realm of Shelley and Byron. This is obviously a huge part of Greek culture and Greek mythology. There is this communion with mythological archetype, which is something that must be accessed by way of the inner journey, whether this is of the dream, of the imagination, but it is by going within. And this is an entirely different but slightly ulterior. It's like looking through a mirror or a lake, a refractory lens through which something else ulterior is perceived, much in the way that the sword, right, at the death of King Arthur is returned to the Lady of the Lake through the water. This refractory experience, this is also present in a Cocteau film. I believe the film is actually titled Orpheus, where there is this sort of mirror that is water through which an ulterior experience is reached. And this is, again, the shroud or the veil of Maya. And when we describe this is the illusion or the illusory content of the ephemeral products, quote unquote, of the material world, that through which the sort of shamanic or heroic figure or the medicine person must pass in order to come into true contact with the pleromic aspect of reality, which is capital R reality, which is the entirety of the spiritude of the cosmos. And before this is done, all sorts of forces and things and actors and figures appear to be real solid entities with certain poles and gravities, and we are existing in this realm of the attractors as opposed to the realm of the creator. And so, of course, you're going to have within adolescent culture or a pre-adolescent culture a culture of perpetual consumption, mindless perpetual consumption, which is supposed to gratify. And it gratifies only for a moment in the way that maybe smoking a pack of cigarettes or drinking alcohol, right? Again, these are the drugs of a mindless consumer culture, precisely because they gratify for such a short period of time and then return to the user precisely to the state that they left them. They drop them right off, if even not further back down the road. It's like some sort of reverse transportation device. And of course, you have in hyper-accelerated cultures like the sort of the Greek mystery schools, the Egyptian mystery schools, and you could debate what these sources of these sort of hyper-accelerated experiences or contacts with consciousness, right, touching the pleroma or the face of God. There is a psychedelic theme there, and a psychedelic is a exponential revolution forward in consciousness. And what is a product of these hyper-consumerist, hyper-materialistic cultures whose gods are dead, or whose God is dead in the Old Testament sense, right? This Old Testament God, which is the God of forces, right? The God of causes and effects, the God of things, right? Who rules these things? Their God is gone and has been replaced with these pleasures, right? These pleasure centers, whether you want to say that's social media or these drugs that are inhibitors or dampeners of consciousness. And that leaves a pre-adolescent society or a pre-adolescent humanity stuck in a state of pre-adolescence. And precisely what these sort of revelatory hyper-consciousness experiences or hyperspace consciousness experiences, whether, again, you want to have a discussion about psychedelics or not, these were reserved in ancient societies for those who were prepared for initiation, right? And then they would become the initiated. This was obviously a very small group of people, but what requires in this modern world, in faced with existential crisis, being that the entirety of the global civilization is at a pre-adolescent stage of consciousness, is that these mystery schools effectively be opened up. And that each member of humanity goes through this experience of a hyper-acceleration of consciousness, whether that's by psychedelics or by initiation by, you could say, quote-unquote, kinder means, by one who already has been initiated, whether that was by fate or choice or whatever you want to say. And this is precisely the moment or the nexus at which we stand. It is a culture that is deeply impoverished, and hence a humanity that is deeply impoverished by a failure or a lack of the encounter with the soul, and of course all of the detritus that comes with that, all of the empty cultural trash, psychological baggage, the manipulation and miscommunication, and the entire epicenter of the modern economy being centered around profit or taking advantage of another person or another thing or a aspect of nature, without understanding that, again, this aspect of the pleroma, this oneness or this wholeness. And I think that is where we'll leave this talk today.